Hey guys, I am here this week to share with you about an important reading concept, which is discovering what the main idea and the supporting details to those main idea or to the main idea is. So this week we'll be spending each day working with main idea. You are going to discover the main idea of text and then give supporting details that prove that what you say is the main idea. So, to get us started, I am going to tell you exactly what main idea is. A main idea, anytime you hear that phrase, all that means is the big picture or the major point that the author of any story or text, whether it's literary or informational, wants you to take away from the text. So when you hear the words main idea, think, what does the author really want me to remember? After I read this text, there's one thing that the author really wants me to remember. And that one thing is called the main idea. Now, there are details that go along with the main idea. So, when the author is trying to get you to remember a certain main idea, what they will do is they will put details throughout the text that will support that main idea or important details that let you know that you're on the right track, that this is the main idea. So, those supporting details are important pieces, important details in the text that the author has used to help support the main point of the text. Now, main idea and theme are different. They are not the same. Theme is an overall lesson or a takeaway, something you're supposed to learn. It's an overall understanding, a life lesson that is taught from a story. Main idea is not necessarily a lesson. Main idea is simply a topic. It is the big point of the story. So, excuse me, to help us practice finding the main idea and to practice finding details that support the main idea, I'm going to share with you a story. You know, one of my favorite things is to read stories. So I'm going to share with you a story, although I'm not going to start the story the same way that I would start most stories, which is by telling you the title. I'm not going to tell you the title because I want you, as you're reading, to be thinking about what the author's main point of the story is. Usually, the author will use in literary terms, in fiction writing. Usually, the author will use the title of the text or the story to lead you to the main idea. So, as I'm reading this, I want you to think, what does the author want me to remember? Because the one thing that the author wants you to remember is going to be the main idea. So you're thinking as we're reading, what does the author want me to remember? What's the one thing they want me to remember? And what evidence do I have from the text that lets me know that this is the author's main thing that they want me to remember? What details can I pull from the story that support or that make the main idea stronger as you read, as you listen to me read? I want you to be thinking about what's the main idea, what are some details that I can give to support. Okay, so here's our story. I'll show you the back cover. And then as you're thinking about the main idea and supporting details, when we realize what the title of the story is, I want you to see if it matches what your main idea was in your mind. Okay? All right. This story is called, I'm not telling you yet. It was cold, it was rainy, and Mrs. Ruler's class hadn't been outside all week. The students were getting jumpy and grumpy, Anaya and Tawana whispered during story time. David pulled Rockoletta's ponytail and Rockoletta stole his hat. Then David grabbed Connor's hat and threw it into the hall. That's enough! Too rough! Shouted Mrs. Ruler. The bell rang and it was time for recess. As the kids left, Mrs. Ruler kept Anaya, Tawana, Connor, Rockoletta, and David behind. Sit down. Don't frown, she said. Now, tell me, why do you think I've kept you in from recess? We were acting up, mumbled Connor. That's right. You were being mean to one another, and you acted as if it's cool to be mean. But it's not. What is a cooler way to act? Rockaletta spoke up. Kindness is cooler, Mrs. Ruler, she said. Bravo! A slice of nice makes a mile of smile. You five need to practice being kind. During the next few days, I want you to perform 5 acts of kindness for your families. Then, in show and tell, you can share what you did with the rest of the class. David scowled. What if I don't feel like being kind? He asked. Mrs. Ruler smiled. Good deeds fill needs. Count on me. You'll see, she said. The next day, Anaya and Tawana couldn't wait for show and tell. When it was their turn, they ran to the front of the class. We did 10 acts of kindness last night, said Tawana. Before dinner, I made special placemats. I set the table, said Anaya. I drew hearts on the napkins to show Mom we love her, said Tawana. I grated the cheese for the macaroni, said Anaya. I helped make the salad, said Tawana. After dinner, we carried the dishes to the sink, said Anaya, and I loaded the dishwasher, said Tawana. While I took out the garbage, said Anaya. Then I sponged off the table, said Tawana, and I straightened up the chairs, finished Anaya. Mom told us how much she liked our homework. It put her in such a good mood that we wanted to do more nice things for her. Remember, what do you think the one thing the author wants you to remember from this story is? And what are some details that support that? Bravo, said Mrs. Ruler. 10x will lead to more. Give me the chalk and I'll keep score. Then she wrote the twins' deeds on the chalkboard. When she was finished, she looked at David. What about you? She asked. Did you practice too? No, said David. I just couldn't get into it. Oh my, please try. Kindness is cooler, said Mrs. Ruler. Sorry, covered up their faces there. After school, Rockaletta invited Connor over for a play date. She had a new dog and a big family, so there were lots of ways Rockaletta and Connor could practice being kind. In show and tell the next day, they shared kindness with the class. We took Puddles for a walk, said Rockaletta, and we threw him a ball. I filled his water dish, said Connor. And I gave him some puppy chow, said Rockaletta. Puppy chow? Wow, said Mrs. Ruler. Then we built a block tower with my little brother, said Rockaletta, and gave Abuelo and Abuelita their canes before they took a walk. We also helped Rocoletta's dad carry in groceries from the car, said Connor. And I gave my baby sister her bottle, said Rockaletta. I count 8, and 8 is great, said Mrs. Ruler. That's not all, said Connor. When I got home, I took in the mail. I also carried the clean laundry upstairs. Bravo, said Mrs. Ruler. Altogether, you did 10. And how much do the twins' 10 acts and your 10 make? 20, shouted the class. That's right, said Mrs. Ruler. 20 is plenty. But how about you, David? What did you do? Too few for you, said David. The class laughed. I told my brother I liked his haircut, and I let him use my comb. That's all I could think of. Well, that's a good start. Keep doing your part, said Mrs. Ruler. Lauren raised her hand. I'd like to try some acts of kindness when I get home today, too, she said. Okay, hooray, said Mrs. Ruler. Let's turn this into a class project. For the rest of the week, I'd like you to bring in some acts of kindness you've done at home. I'll write your acts on paper hearts and put them on the bulletin board, and I'll add the ones from the blackboard. More acts of kindness. Put away clothes, vacuumed living room rug, shelved books, let my big brother use my computer, told dad I liked his shirt, got sister a band-aid when she skinned her knee. And more kindness. Cleaned my room, fed goldfish, emptied waste baskets, watered house plants, put groceries away, drew pictures with my little sister, told my sister that she has nice teeth. The class really came through. We have so many, we'll need another wall, Mrs. Ruler explained. Let's count. 1, 2, 3. The kids counted until they reached 35. Bravo, said their teacher. Now try skip counting by fives. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, shouted the class. That's right, you're bright, said Mrs. Ruler. We should keep going with this project. Now let's try some acts of kindness at school. I'll add those to the wall too. Don't forget, a slice of nice makes a mile of smile. As Mrs. Ruler kept cutting out more hearts, Connor and Pablo tried some kindness too. They invited David to sit with them at lunch. But when they finished their sandwiches, David took one of Connor's cookies. Hey, quit it, said Connor. He grabbed David's lunchbox and threw it over his head. Stop, cried Pablo. Don't you remember what Mrs. Ruler said? Good deeds fill needs. David, don't grab. And Connor, you still have 4 cookies. Why don't you share them with David and me? Oops, said Connor. You're right. For a moment I forgot about being kind and gave Connor some cookies and Connor gave some cookies, to his friends. I agree. Here are 3. Yum, said David. I'm going to ask my babysitter to help me make cookies when I get home. And then you can bring them to school, said Pablo, and share them with the whole class, added Connor. And Mrs. Ruler will congratulate me for being extra kind, said David, but I still won't have done as many acts of kindness as everyone else. So think of other things to catch up, said Pablo. David didn't have to think for long. That afternoon, when Caitlin was cleaning the gerbil's cage, the gerbils got loose. One even jumped to the window ledge. Mrs. Ruler hopped on a chair. She cried. Everyone ran for cover. Everyone but David. He chased the gerbils. He scooped them up one by one. Then he sent them back where they belong. Hooray for David! Yelled the class. Your act of kindness was the best, cried Mrs. Ruler. Now go on home and do the rest. She jumped off the chair and added the acts of kindness from that week to the wall. Mrs. Ruler and the class counted up all of the hearts. By now, the class had done 75 acts of kindness. That's great. But wait, said Mrs. Ruler, there's more in store. Let's keep going and spread some kindness beyond school. There are lots of kind acts you can do in the community. But we're just little kids, said David. How can we do stuff outside our house and school? I'll ask your parents to work with you on community kindness. And I'll help too, said Mrs. Ruler. All it takes is one simple act, one act of kindness that will make the world a better place. If you act from your heart and do your part, we'll end up with 100 acts of kindness altogether. Now the class was really excited, and David was more excited than anyone. A few weeks later, the kids shared their acts of community kindness. Mrs. Ruler added more hearts to the wall. Again, the class counted 1, 2, 3 until they got to 99. Oh no, said Mrs. Ruler. We still need one more. Then she paused and thought for a moment. I know, let's have a class party. We'll decorate and celebrate 100 acts of kindness, shouted the class. Okay, hooray! I can get that last page. And then here are the 100 acts of kindness that the class did. Now, that is the end of our story. I did not give you the title, but I want you to think, what's the one thing the author wanted me to remember at the end of the story? After I finish reading, and I stop and think, why? What was the author's point? What did the author want me to remember? What do you think? Did the author want you to remember that David was grumpy? No, that's not the one thing that the author wanted you to remember from the story. Did the author want you to remember that Mrs. Ruler is a great teacher? Not necessarily. That's not the main focus of the story. Did the author want you to remember that it is important to be kind? Yes, the author did want you to remember it is important to be kind. Now, what are some details that help us to remember the main point? What did the author do throughout the story? What are some examples throughout the story that the author gave to support the main idea that kindness is important? Okay, so I'm going to erase this. We found the big picture, the central point. The central point of this story that we don't know the title of yet. The main idea is that it is important to be kind. Think about the author wrote this entire book, and on every page, just about, there's talk about being kind. There's encouragement from Mrs. Ruler to her students to be kind. And originally, she only encouraged 5 students. Can you remember why she encouraged those 5 students to be kind? If you remember at the very beginning of the story, the students were not being kind to Mrs. Ruler or their classmates or themselves because they were not paying attention in class. They were distracted. They were off task. And Mrs. Ruler asked those 5 to stay in from recess. They didn't get recess that day because they had to learn about how it is important to be kind. And every page after that encouraged each student, not just those 5, but the whole class, to not just be kind in the classroom, not to just be kind at home, not just to be kind in the community, but to be kind everywhere. Okay, so if you didn't put your main idea in your mind in my exact words, as long as you have that the main idea is teaching us to, or not teaching us, it's telling us that kindness is important, that's important to be nice, it's important to share love and show love, anything along those lines mean that you were exactly on point with finding the main idea of this story. So good for you. Now we need to think of some supporting details. These are details that support the main idea. So what happened in the story that shows that being kind is important? So now we have to go back to the text and we have to look for some examples of where the author is showing that it is important to be kind. Can you think of one supporting detail from the story that supports the idea that it is important to be kind? What about the fact that Mrs. Ruler made a celebration for every time someone did a kind act? So if we go back in the text, I'm looking and I see that after Anaya and Tawana came in to share what they did at home, those 10 acts of kindness, Mrs. Ruler kind of made a big deal out of it. Bravo, 10 acts will lead to more. Give me the chalk and I'll keep score. And she wrote the twins good acts on the board. So, one supporting detail from the story that shows that it is important to be kind is that Mrs. Ruler celebrated Anaya. I'm going to make sure I spell her name correctly, both of their names. And Tawana. 10 kind acts. Okay, that is very important. That is one detail that shows that the author wants us to remember that being kind is important. Can you think of any other supporting detail? What about the next day when Roccoletta invited Connor over for a play date? I'm pulling it straight from the text. The next day, when Roccoletta invited Connor over to play, although that's not a supporting detail, that's just a detail of the story. Roccoletta inviting Connor over to play could be a supporting detail because that is showing kindness, but it's not the main thing that was celebrated in the story. Although she invited Connor over to play, the main thing that they were looking to do when they were playing at Roccoletta's was to be kind, to spread acts of kindness. So we can say a supporting detail would be that Mrs. Ruler celebrated Anaya and Tawana's 10 kind acts. I'm going to come up here with my list since I'm running out of space down here. Another supporting detail would be that Roccoletta and Connor played together just so they could do kind acts. It was at this point in the story where Roccoletta and Connor start sharing that they took the dog for a walk. They filled the dog's water bowl. They gave the dog food. They helped Roccoletta's grandparents. They gave the baby a bottle. So they didn't just get together to play. That wasn't the kind act. The supporting detail for this main idea is that they got together and they played just so they could be kind. And I'm thinking of one last huge detail that proves that the main idea is that being kind is important. And if we remember at the end, Mrs. Ruler had a class party. Oh, I'm running out of room. I'm going to erase this. You've seen it though. You can rewind it if you missed it. Mrs. Ruler had a class party to celebrate what? 100 acts of kindness. What does this detail say? This detail says that the author must think it is important for us to remember that being kind is important. So those are just 3 details. We could have pulled out more and more details because really the whole story is full of examples of how being kind is important. Those are all supporting details. The twins helping at home, Roccoletta and Connor helping Roccoletta's family, David helping his family, even though Originally, he didn't really feel like being kind. The rest of the class asking if they can join in and be kind. I'm going to add that up to the top because I do think that that's an important supporting detail. Other students asked to participate. So other students asked to do kind acts. And there's another one that I think is also important. I promise you, this will be my last supporting detail. But what about that bulletin board? Remember, Mrs. Ruler made a bulletin board where she displayed everyone's acts of kindness. That is showing. It's a detail that shows and it supports the main idea that being kind is important. So all kind acts were written on the board. Okay, each of these supporting details, and you can see there are a lot because we can keep going, but each of these prove that the main idea is that it is important to be kind now. For the pièce de résistance, the the ultimate unveiling, I want you to think about what the title of this story is. Knowing that the main idea is what, however you choose to put it, something around how it's important to be kind. That's the main idea. We got details that support that. So what then could the title be? Because usually the title gives us the biggest clue about what the author's main idea is. So what could the title be? What could the title be? What could the title be? Kindness is cooler, Mrs. Ruler. That's the title. Does the title match the main idea? Yeah, good job, guys. Good job. All right, now you're going to get to do this on your own. You're going to take what we have done together. You are going to read a passage. You are going to discover the main idea, and you are going to tell me some key supporting details that support that main idea. Okay?